Well, it says we're live, so I suppose we might as well get started. Because no time like the present, right? It's 11:30. It's a Saturday night. Pitt is 1-4. They lost 4 in a row, and they lost to what I thought was one of the worst teams in the ACC tonight. There were basically two games this weekend in the ACC. We always talk about like separation Saturday, separation Sunday. You know, who's the top teams? We're going to find out who's for real and who's this or who's that. Well, this was a separation Saturday in the ACC. And there were two games in the ACC that really were to decide who belonged in a certain spot. Quite frankly, these two games were to decide who is at the bottom of the ACC. Because you have Boston College against Virginia, and you had this game that we just watched tonight. This game that just ended with Pitt losing 38-21. And guess what? Just like Virginia losing to Boston College meant that the Cavaliers really are at the bottom of the ACC, your Pitt Panthers are in the cellar too. And that's not just by record. It's not just about the fact that they're 0-2. It's the fact that they haven't beaten an FBS team. It's the fact that they've lost 4 games in a row. It's the fact that they're 1-4 overall, 0-2 in the ACC. They just lost to another team that was supposed to be at the bottom. I mean, you had 4 of the 5 teams at the bottom of the ACC playing each other this week. And none of them were going to emerge as champions of the conference from this game. Nobody was going to rise to the top of the power rankings from these two games. But you were at least going to be able to put yourself a little bit above that bottom tier. Forget that. You are the bottom tier. You're at the bottom of the conference now. You are the bottom of the ACC. In 2 years, you have gone from the top to the bottom. From first to last. And it's you and Virginia. With the only difference being that Virginia has not won any games. And Pitt at least beat Wofford. You know. So you got that going for you. Virginia, well, they have William and Mary next week, so they might get on even ground with Pitt and having one win. It's the bottom of the ACC. You have bottomed out in the conference. And who knows if you bottomed out on this season yet. I would have said that losing to Virginia Tech would be a real bottoming out, but there's still Boston College left on the schedule. You couldn't stop Kyron Drones, who you made look like Cam Newton. You couldn't stop him. You think you're going to stop Boston College? I mean, 4 hours ago, I would have said that's ridiculous. Of course they could stop Boston College. I mean, what are you talking about? Boston College, they stink. You don't get to look down on anyone because you're looking up at everyone. You are at the bottom. You are the bottom of the ACC now. Are you the worst team in the conference? No, Virginia still is 0-5, so they get to hold that title at least for another week until they beat William and Mary, and they improve to 1-5. Pitt's off this week, and then they get Louisville after that. So we'll see if that drops them to 1-5, and then they can match Virginia and be partners at the bottom of the ACC. What a mess. What an absolute mess that this program has found itself in right now. 5 games in to the 2023 season, 1 month of the season down, and these next 7 games can't get over with soon enough. Well, quite frankly, they really can't. Because this team has problems top to bottom, front to back, left to right, and every way in between. From the press box to the sidelines. And I'm not talking about my, guys like Jerry and Hammett and Hiles and Carter. From the press box to the sidelines, from one end of the field to the other. This team has issues. They had an 11-yard punt today. They scored a defensive touchdown and still lost the game by 17 points. They hit 2 certifiable big play touchdowns, a 75-yard touchdown, a 61-yard touchdown, and scored a defensive touchdown and still lost a game by 17 points. They faced a team that had given up 200 rushing yards to every opponent they faced except for one. 4 out of their first 5 games, or 3 out of the first 4 games, their opponents rushed for 200 yards, and the one team that didn't ran for like 179 and threw for another 250. And what did Pitt finish with? This almost feels like the kind of post-game show where why do we even bother with stats and things like that? Pitt finished with 38 rushing yards. 38 rushing yards. Now, that's including Phil Drakovic's minus 22 on sacks, because Virginia Tech had 4 sacks for 44 yards. So I guess if you add those 34 back in, they rushed for 72 yards. Way to go. Averaged 3.6 yards per carry. You can't run the ball. You can't stop the ball. You can't throw the ball. Your pass defense is about what it always has been, relying on the pass rush largely to either force bad throws or make sacks in the backfield. Couldn't really get that done because they couldn't make any tackles tonight. They had more missed tackles than points scored, I presume. Can't kick a long field goal. Ben Sauls has missed 2 now this season. Can't punt reliably because your punts led to a punt return touchdown last week, and then had an 11-yard punt tonight. What other football skills are there that I'm not thinking of right now? I can't think of any. It's a mess. It's It's ugly. And you're 1-4. And 1-4 is, let's say you are what your record are. Or you are what your record is. And Pitt is certainly that. Let's drink, folks. I hope you have something dark. Dark, strong, and to the point. We might need a couple of these tonight. This might be the kind of night where we get a couple of these. I got a couple cold ones over here. I know my friend Jerry DePaula is out there, and he's got the Crown Royal. So, Jerry, I hope you're tuning in right now. He just sent me a text message, Jerry did, asking when I'm going live. So I'm going to send him the link. I'll give him a second. Jerry, I hope you can tune in soon. And when Jerry tunes in, then I will... Actually, I'm not going to wait for Jerry. When Jerry tunes in, we'll do another one. But to watching a 1-4 start, to losing 4 in a row, to watching a 17-point loss against a team that, coming into today, I thought stinks. I still don't know if they're any good, which says a whole hell of a lot about Pitt. We'll keep that glass handy. I should put the lid back on the bottle, though, because, let's be honest, the arms might start waving on this game tonight. It's one of these things, and we'll probably just jump into the super chats right off the bat. Listen, we're going to have a lot of people online tonight. I know that. I mean, we can already see there's a lot of people tuned in for the post-game show. You're going to have a lot of comments. You're going to have a lot of questions. I want to get to as many as I can. I'm not going to be able to get to all of them. If you want to make sure I get to your comment or get to your question, you can be a super chatter. All right. It's the least you can do to make us all feel better about ourselves. Click the little super chat button, the little $sign button at the bottom. A bunch of people have done it already. If you get a super chat, we'll definitely read your comment and your question and answer it to the best of our ability. And so I'm going to start scrolling through those because people were already posting comments and questions before things even started. It was in the early fourth quarter and people were posting comments and questions. I'm going to try and go through those, but it's interesting after a game like this. I don't know. I want to sit here and I want to talk about the quarterback situation, which is a disaster. I want to talk about the offense as a whole, which is a disaster. I want to talk about Rodney Hammond's ghosting of the second half. I can only presume that he was hurt considering he touched the ball once in the second half, and I only saw him play one snap in the second half. I want to talk about how they don't get the ball out of the playmakers. Talk about Bub Means being out, the offensive line, all the things on defense, including some things that I actually thought were good, which were frustrating in and of themselves because some of the things that I thought were good, like Solomon DeShields, Shane Simon, I thought those guys were playing well, and I think those guys are good, and yet I look out there countless number of times and I see their backups on the field, particularly in the second half, particularly when they give up the fumble. Phil Dracovic fumbles, Virginia Tech gets the ball at first and goal at the 10, and you come out with Nick Lappy, Brandon George, and who was the other one? Might have been Kyle Lewis, who started and played the whole game, and the fumble. Nick Lappy, Brandon George, and Kyle Lewis. And they get a sack. Lappy gets a sack on the first play. Okay. And then Drones runs for, or on the second play, Lappy gets a sack, 5 yards, pushes him back to the 10, and then Drones just runs for a first down, or runs for a touchdown, excuse me. So even something that I thought was good, which is a couple of those linebackers, the first team guys, obviously Braille and Lovelace made some big plays. Even that was frustrating because they continuously took those guys off the field. I think for most of the second half, they should have been out there every play. I remember Pitt coaches in the past with, defensive line coaches, either Charlie Partridge or maybe even going back to Greg Gattuso, saying, yeah, I saw so-and-so trying to tap out, and I just pretended like I didn't see him because I knew he needed to stay on the field. I mean, DeShields, Simon, and either Lewis or Lovelace needed to be on the field that whole second half to give the offense a chance to win. And they weren't. But, I mean, that's not the reason they lost. There are a million reasons why they lost. We'll talk about probably 950,000 of them today, and I bet we're going to get a lot of those topics addressed in the Super Chats. So let's start with Alan McMurray. He's the first Super Chatter. He says, Chris, where the hell do they go from here? 1-11 is knocking on the door and about to walk right in. So many to blame. Pat is by far number one on the list. All right. That's a great spot to start, Alan. You see him right there. That photo's from pregame when he was smiling with Frank Signetti in that photo. From the time he was hired, December 26, 2014, I believe that was the day of his introductory press conference, Pat Narduzzi has talked about being the CEO of the program. I know that was admirable at the time. When he was hired, he was replacing Paul Christ, a coach who was the offensive coordinator, the head coach in name, but the offensive coordinator. He was a coach who spent, let's just pick a random number, 85% of his time with the offense. That was Paul Christ's thing. He was not a CEO of the program. And so Pat Narduzzi talking about being the CEO of a program was a breath of fresh air. He took responsibility for the entirety of the program. Every detail mattered to him, and he still talks about that. I remember talking to him probably last fall or maybe earlier this fall, I forget when, about every detail being important. He walks down the hallway, he sees some area that needs to be painted, little stuff like that. Every detail is important to him, and I believe that it is. The product that is being put on the field this year, in a whole lot of areas, is a direct reflection on him. And I'm trying to think of the right word here. Mistakes he has made in his overseeing of the program. Let's put it that way. Okay? Because the offense isn't working. And this is 18 games now of the offense not working. That falls on the CEO of the program. The CEO of the program put together the group that is running the offense, put together the leadership of the offense. He talks about being the CEO of the program, and the coordinators are the head coaches of that side of the ball. The offensive coordinator is the head coach of the offense. The defensive coordinator is the head coach of the defense. That's fine. I think that's an admirable approach. He takes a very hands-off approach in letting those guys do, particularly the offensive coordinator, do what they want to do and call it as they feel that they need to call it and operate the way it needs to be operated. That they feel it needs to be operated. That's fine. I commended Narduzzi for that and respected him for that in 2014. I respect him for it right now. But that means that it falls on you when the people you put in place fail. And this offense has failed for 18 games. It's as simple as that. And so, yes, Alan, to your point, it does fall on Pat Narduzzi. And he would probably be the first to tell you that. I would hope he would. Because everything that happens in this program happens under his watch and with his approval. And whether that's the offensive coordinator, whether that's the quarterback, whether it's the staffing at other positions on the coaching staff, whether it's the players that have been put together through recruiting, through the transfer portal, it all falls on Narduzzi. And this is absolutely shaping up to be the worst season of his career here at Pitt. And it's shaping up to be a major blemish on his resume. To go from the number one spot in the ACC to arguably the bottom, very last spot, number 14. And you can debate right now who's worse. And I didn't think I'd be saying that. And through a few games, I was able to rationalize certain parts of it. But when you go to Virginia Tech and you play a team that was 1-3, just like you, looked bad, looked worse than you have, and you make them look like they're, should be a top 25 team I mean, Virginia Tech looked like they had all the elements to be a top 25 team tonight. They got a quarterback, they got a running back, they got a great running game, they have a good balanced offensive attack, they got a defense that puts pressure on the quarterback and stops the run. I mean, what was missing? What was missing from this Virginia Tech team? They look like they should be in a top 15 team. There are pollsters all over the country. I'm just kidding. None of them actually watch this game. But if there would be pollsters all over the country saying, why did I ignore my natural ingrown tendency to always rank Virginia Tech? Why did I ignore that this year? Because this clearly is a team that should be in the top 25. Seriously, they made Kyron Jones look like Cam Newton. And they made Henry Tootin, they made number 33 look like, I mean, who do you want to even call him? I mean, James Conner or something. And it was through, I mean, there was some of it was good scheming, and some of it was they just got their tails kicked up and down the field. And I thought the defense had rounded into form. See, this is what would happen. We'll read a comment or a question, then we'll end up going off on a tangent. I thought the defense had rounded into form. I really did. They had the first half against Cincinnati. That was rough, but they settled down in the second half. They really, I thought they defended the run well at West Virginia. It was really volume that ended up getting West Virginia the yards that they had. Carolina did what Carolina is going to do. Drake May did what Drake May is going to do to most teams he faces. But I thought overall the defense is going to be okay. I think the defense will be all right. Well, they weren't all right. They couldn't tackle. They couldn't stop the run. They couldn't defend the perimeter, whether it was getting attacked from tosses, pitches, or screen passes. However, whatever Virginia Tech wanted to do to get the ball to the perimeter, it was almost always successful. And then every now and then they'd run it up the gut just to prove that they really just owned you in this game. And that all falls on Narduzzi. I mean, that all falls on him, the state of the team right now. And I don't go so far as to say the state of the program. I got a lot of thoughts about the future and where they'll go from here and what the next few years will look like and things like that. But honestly, who wants to talk about that tonight? We're not here at 10 to 12 on a Saturday night to talk about what 2025 is going to look like or 2026. We're here to talk about this game tonight. This embarrassment of a performance that has Pitt firmly at the bottom of the ACC. Let's go to more super chatters here. Scrolling down, try and find you guys. Michael B, always a reliable one, says, Chris, I think it's a real possibility Pitt could go 1-11. That to me is beyond inexcusable. No, I think you mean it's beyond excusable, or it is inexcusable. Do you think Heather Lyke would consider cutting ties with Pat Narduzzi after the season, or at the very least make him hire an all-new staff? No and no. No, I don't think Pat Narduzzi is getting fired after the season. I think that it's just not going to happen. I think he's done enough here. He's built enough here. He's built enough goodwill here. And he's done enough for the program overall here that he's not going to get fired after the season. I also don't think Heather Lyke is going to force Pat Narduzzi to make any changes. We've gone over this a lot on the message boards. I've shared my thoughts on this a lot of times. I don't think it's good executive leadership from Heather Lyke to force a head coach to fire his or her assistants. I think if you are the head executive, like Heather Lyke, if you're in her position as the director of athletics, you hire the head coaches with the understanding that the performance of their program is on them, that they bear the responsibility for and the accountability for the performance of their programs. And so if an area of the program is not performing, then it's up to that head coach to make the necessary changes, because if he or she does not, and that area of the team does not improve, and it causes the team to suffer and struggle and enjoy less success, then it's on the head coach. And the head coach pays the price, like Lance White paid the price. That, I think, is Heather Lyke's approach. I think that's what should be Heather Lyke's approach. Now, I'll say this about Pat Narduzzi, okay? When it wasn't working with Sean Watson, he fired Sean Watson. When it wasn't working with John Peterson, he fired John Peterson. When it wasn't working with Tom Sims, he fired Tom Sims. When it wasn't working with Kevin Sherman, he fired Kevin Sherman. He's had coaches who have left of their own volition, Jim Chaney, I don't think was fired, but I think there was a bit of a mutual parting of ways. Matt Canada obviously left on his own. Josh Conklin was probably a mutual parting of ways. He had the opportunity to go to Wofford and be the head coach. Ronaldo Hill, Rob Harley. I mean, these guys left on their own. But Narduzzi has not shied away from firing coaches over the years. And I think if he gets to the end of the season and what we're seeing now, if what we're seeing now continues over the next 7 games, and there will only be 7 games, there won't be an 8th game if this keeps up. And I mean, I shouldn't even talk like that. I mean, is anybody realistically considering the possibility of them going 5-1? Or 5-2 over the next 7 games? I mean, it sure feels like bowl eligibility is out the window. And I know a lot of people were saying that after Cincinnati or after the West Virginia game. I mean, I reserve the right to withhold judgment until a later date. But if these issues keep up over the next 7 games, I find it really hard to believe that Narduzzi would not take the same initiative that he took with some of those guys that I just mentioned. Watson, Sherman, Peterson, Sims. He has made changes. He has fired coaches. If they have the kind of season that it certainly looks like they're on track to have, I can't believe that he wouldn't make changes once again. It may be more changes than we've seen at in any one off season. EV says, no urgency, terrible play calling, poor tackling, worst quarterback play I've ever seen. Phil is still the biggest problem. Get him out and give Christian Veer and Nate Yarnell a shot. Tell you the truth, EV, to tell you the truth, I would have played Nate Yarnell in the second half. I would have played Nate Yarnell in the second half. Would he have handled the pressure that was coming any better than Phil Dracovic? I don't know. Would he have handled it worse? I'm not sure he could have. I guess he could have thrown an interception every time there was pressure, but at least maybe if you get a new quarterback who comes in there in the second half, he's not quite as gun shy and not quite as, rattled by the pressure as Dracovic clearly was after the first half. I understand if you look at, Christian Veer's performance last week, admittedly in a difficult situation, and he threw the 2 interceptions. You would say, well, we don't want to go to him because we're worried that he's going to turn the ball over, which, by the way, did anybody catch a clip at the end of the game where it looks like Veer and some of the other backup quarterbacks just yucking it up, having a good time, down 17, getting their asses kicked at Blacksburg? Anybody catch that? Or was that just me? Was I just imagining that? Sure looked that way. But I digress. If you're apprehensive about putting in Veer because he threw the 2 interceptions last week, I understand that. So go with Nate Yarnell, who you put in at the Western Michigan game on the road with a game plan that relied heavily on the run. Give him a chance, to take the reins a little bit more. I probably would have tried that because I'm not really sure how much longer you can go with this. And you know what? 2 weeks ago after the West Virginia game, we said the same damn thing, didn't we? We said, I'm not sure how much longer you can really go with this. Well, now, again, how much longer can you really go with this? How many more passes have to be one hop to a receiver or skipped off the dirt? And I know there's pressure, and I know the receivers aren't doing their jobs, and I know this, and I know that. But you know what? Sometimes a duck is a duck. Sometimes a bad pass is a bad pass, regardless of the pressure and regardless of the routes. And it's 11 guys, and it's a team sport and all this stuff. But the ball is in the quarterback's hands. And if the quarterback can't do things with the ball to move the team down the field, then you have to find a guy who can. And if nobody else on the team can, by golly, you better get Alliance 412 on the phone. Because you better get a quarterback. You better find one, a real one for next year. One who can help you play and help you win. Because it's just not... And he's, and I wrote down when... There was one play where it was almost going to be a delay of game, but they called a timeout before it was going to be like their 4th delay of game penalty, and the Virginia Tech D tackle came through and knocked the ball out, and Phil Dracovic chased him down and was getting in his face and everything. I wrote that down. I said, well, maybe that'll be a spark that the team needs. No, I mean, it wasn't a spark. It was just a guy jawing while he's losing by 2 touchdowns. And that's good. I like the moxie. I like the like having that extra energy. That's cool, but What actually did they do? I wrote down that whole sequence. Yeah, it was on a 3rd and 10. Right. And it was on a 3rd and 10. It was going to be a delay of game, but they got the timeout in time. Djokovic's all jawing, thought he was going to be really fired up, and on 3rd and 10, when they finally ran the play, he overthrew Carter Johnson by like 8 yards, and Johnson was covered anyway, so I'm not really sure what he was throwing to begin with. So I'm not sure the jawing really mattered. And if that D tackle was still on the field, I imagine he probably had a word or two for Djokovic after that play. What a mess. What a mess. The whole game. Just a mess. Let's see. Crypto Ducat says, can Pitt ever be relevant beyond a season here or there? I'm tired of the false hope each season. Yeah, I mean, yes. I think they can. I think, let me say this. What would be like the model program to try to emulate here? It'd probably be like a Michigan State, right? Generally staying in that 8-win and above range. I mean, not this season, but generally staying in that 8-win and above range. Occasionally making noise in their conference when things sort of align, and and who knows what you can sort of. You get that point at the top of the cycle where you have some success. Sorry, I'm just Brent Pry is talking over a few of the highlights from the game here on the post-game show, and kind of curious what he's saying, but I have the volume down so I can't hear it. I should have turned the closed captioning on. A program like that. I mean, that's probably what, if you're Pitt, that's probably what you want to be, or the sort of how you want to kind of navigate the cycles. That you sort of have 8 wins as a floor, and then you cycle up and down, and when things sort of come together and you've got the right pieces in place, because you're not going to have that 5-star talent year in, year out. You're going to have to develop guys. You're going to have to sort of cycle it up and then inevitably have a cycle down. But the cycle up, you want to be able to compete for your conference and maybe make a little noise nationally. And by and large, that's what Narduzzi has been. And in the dips, the dip was like 2017 when they went 5-7. The dip was a little bit the next year when they still actually ended up winning the Coastal, and really even 2019. That was sort of a 3-year dip where they went 5-7, 7-7, 8-5. And 2020 was weird. I mean, you just kind of wave your arms, with all of this and whatnot. And then obviously they cycled up in 2021 and dipped a little bit last year, but still ended up winning 9 games. I mean, I think it's largely been along that model. I mean, he's largely had that kind of success here at Pitt, but now he's in the biggest dip of his tenure here. And so the question becomes not just how low does this dip fall, because it's already pretty much rock bottom, but what happens to follow it up? Do they climb out of this dip next year and the year after that? And again, I mean, it's not really all that interesting to me to talk about 2024 and 25 tonight. I mean, we could do that if you want. But by and large, I think that's what you're looking to be able to do. So when you talk about Pitt being relevant nationally for more than a year here or there, I mean, I think they could. Are they going to be a perennial top 25 team? Probably not. But they should be able to get ranked 3 out of 5 years, 3 out of 6 years, 4 out of 6, something like that. I think that's a reasonable expectation for the program. It just feels like that's very, very far off when you lose to this team, by 17 points. Willett Harris says Jeff Capel needs fired. We appreciate your contribution, sir. John Waffle H2P says, don't care about how much the buyout is. We are losing more money with Narduzzi at the helm. He needs to go. There are better coaches. They're recruiting grade at smaller schools. I know that's... Look, after a game like this, I understand where that's coming from. I think he's built up a lot of goodwill here. I know it feels like he's sort of, wasting that goodwill away. He's had a lot of success here. He's won a conference championship, won 2 division titles. Right now, it feels very far away from those days, and I understand that. I don't think they're firing anybody after this game. I don't think they're firing, I don't think he's getting fired after this season. It's understandable why fans would have that kind of reaction, but I think there are probably cooler heads in the athletic department that look at the big picture of where the program is. It's just in a bad spot right now. But, there's sort of the small picture, which is, boy, the team is not good. And then there's the big picture of where the program is. I think the program is still generally stable and strong. It's just in a dip that a lot of programs like Pitt are going to have at some point, because you're not recruiting at a consistent enough level to sort of sustain over an extended period of time, at 7-8 years, that kind of thing. And I think that's the case for a lot of programs, most programs nationally. It's very few programs that can really have that sustained run. And even, a school like Bama runs in, that run comes to an end at some point. Everybody hits that dip eventually. It's just some schools are able to recruit at a high enough level that they can sustain it longer. For a Pitt or somebody, it might be a couple of years and then a dip. Other schools are able to sustain it longer than that. But I think you still look at the sum total of what Narduzzi has done, and it's a net positive for Pitt. Trying to scroll through these super chats. There should be a way for me to just look at those, because I know we got a bunch in here. Dan Green's a super chatter, but Dan, you need to put your comment in with your super chat because I missed it, man. I'm sorry. Can't see it. We got a lot here. The Whiskey Coach says, Phil, with an archaic 44.9% completion percentage versus FBS teams, many of which are meaningless checkdowns like tonight on 4th and 20, seeing ghosts in the pocket and unable to manage the play clock. What will it take to make a change? From your keyboard to God's ears, brother. I don't know. I don't know. I guess one of the other guys has to look like a better option. It's not just that he has to look like a worse option. The other guys have to look like a better option. And again, it was a difficult situation last week, but I didn't necessarily think Christian Bear looked like a better option in the second half against North Carolina. I didn't. And that's why at halftime tonight, I even texted to somebody. I was like, honestly, I'd put in Yarnell. What do you have to lose? I mean, you're already losing this game, and it already looks like you're going to lose this game. You're down 21-7 at halftime. A 14-point deficit feels like a 40-point deficit for this offense. What do you have to lose? Give Nate Yarnell a chance. And I mean, I normally don't go for just give the young guys a chance. I mean, the reality is you're seeing what give some of the young guys a chance looks like. And not everybody that they're rolling out there is young, but particularly in defense, they are relying on a lot of young and or inexperienced players. I mean, you think about the number of first-time starters that they have out there, particularly at some key positions. You think about the number of younger players who are playing key roles in the rotation. And whether they're first-time starters, whether the first-time starters are freshmen or redshirt freshmen, or whether they're a junior, redshirt junior, senior who just haven't played as much or are starting for the first time this season, it adds up to a lot of inexperience. And what you're seeing is what happens when you just put the young guys out there and let them take their lumps. How many times do we hear that from fans over and over and over again? Well, let's see what this guy's got. Let him take his lumps. Might as well just, if you're going to lose, might as well lose with that guy. Well, you're seeing what it looks like. And it's not pretty. You end up with a corner blitz that, turns into a 30-yard touchdown or whatever that long touchdown pass was. And that, might have just been a product of the scheme. They just had a good route called against that particular blitz package, which they had to run because they were getting beat to the, on the perimeter runs. So you're seeing some of that youth out there. And so when we sit here and say, might as well just give the other quarterback a chance, can't be any worse. I mean, that's actually probably a unique exception to that whole thing, because Phil Dracovic tonight was 11 of 22. And how many of his 11 came on the final drive? Where is it? Well, not the first play, because that was a false start. Let's see. He completed 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Phil Dracovic completed 11 passes tonight. 6 of them came on the final drive. I don't think Nate Yarnell could do worse than that. I don't think... I don't even know if Christian Bear could do worse than that. I don't know if you could do worse than that. 11 completions, 6 on the final drive. So prior to the final drive, what time did the final drive start? Let me get the exact times here. Pitt final drive started at 6:06. So in the first 53 minutes and 54 seconds of this game, Phil Jurkovec completed 5 passes. 5. Right? I mean, does my math check out on this? Am I missing something here? Am I adding numbers together wrong? 5 completions in the first 54 minutes of this game? And then 6 on the final drive. Let me recount. 10-yard pass to Konate Mumfield. -6 to Sebo Flemister. Maybe that didn't count because they had the unsportsmanlike conduct penalty, but I think it did count. 4-yard pass to Dejon Reynolds. 12-yard pass to Konate Mumfield. And then the two check down passes. 3rd and 31 and 4th and 20, they throw check down passes to Gavin Bartholomew. God forbid you throw to Gavin Bartholomew earlier in the game. God forbid you throw to Gavin Bartholomew at points in the game when he could have helped you win this game. You wait until the final 2 plays when it's 3rd and 31 and 4th and 20 to throw to your tight end. On check down passes, not even downfield threats. It's not even like he was running down the seam and he was 25 yards downfield. He got yak on those. He got an 11 and a 10. And probably out of those 21 yards, probably like 16 or 17 were yards after the catch, if not more. And that's how you use your tight end. There's a realistic question. I guess the question was that the question in the super chat of what would it take? What will it take to make a change? I mean, I think the answer is he has to throw a bunch of interceptions. Even though he did that against West Virginia and still started against North Carolina, I guess he has to throw a bunch of interceptions. I guess. I'm not sure what else it would take. You can't really have a more abysmal performance than that. And I know he hit he hit one long touchdown pass and then one really good play with some really crappy tackling by Sebo Flemister. The good play was by Sebo Flemister. The crappy tackling was by Virginia Tech. But he gets credit for it. It was 61 yards, and that goes on Jurkovec's ledger just like all the other things. And some great catches from Konate Mumfield. I don't mean to go down this road where we don't give Phil Jurkovec any credit. Pass to Bub Means was great. Every other pass he threw to Bub Means was not. And then Bub Means somehow got hurt on something. He caught a pass out of bounds, and I think that was the last pass he caught. That might have been the last snap he played. And he got hurt, going to halftime. I don't know. To your question of what will it take to make a change in quarterback, I don't know. I really don't. Biz says, Biz is a super chatter. He says, talk about how Means gave up on routes. Talk about why Phil is supposedly good enough to be on field. This is a mess. What happens when the NIL donations dry up? Goodwill isn't going to last forever. So you know what's wild about like Alliance 412? And we'll talk about this because it's nighttime. The idea of Alliance 412. The idea of these NIL collectives. We don't even need to make it specific about Alliance 412. The idea of these NIL collectives is that fans donate to the collective and that NIL money gets distributed to the players through above board contractual obligation things, right? But the money goes to the players. As such, fans can have a direct impact on the talent level of the team. I mean, realistically, you can have a direct impact on the talent level of the team through NIL, its implications and applications. So, and this has been suggested on the message board, if a fan were upset with the performance of his or her favorite team, if a fan were upset with the talent level of his or her favorite team, if the fan were upset with the, everything going on with his or her favorite team, an on-field showing from his or her favorite team. He or she, through these NIL collectives, has the ability to make a direct impact. And in some sense, whereas, I think a lot of times like success of a team or a program can lead to more donations to the athletic department that they can use for facilities and all those other sorts of things, it almost could work the other way. That if a team is really struggling, fans could be even more motivated to donate to and contribute to these collectives in the effort to, use NIL to make the team better. I mean, it's just sort of the nuts and bolts of it, right? I mean, that's what it represents, is an opportunity for the fans to have a direct impact on the team. And so, you talk about the NIL money running out. I would almost think fans should be like running to contribute and become members because they want the team to improve and they want better players and all of that. You know what I mean? But I don't know. Maybe I'm thinking about it the wrong way. Maybe people have a different perspective. Means giving up on routes. I don't know about that one pass that Means didn't get to. I don't know if it was just thrown. I mean, it wasn't thrown accurately. You know what I mean? It wasn't as good of a throw as it needed to be. It did look like Means let up at the end of the route. I don't want to accuse him of quitting on the route, but I mean, he was wide open. I mean, that was a clear shot that if you get the ball to him in stride, he's going to be able to run and get some yards after the catch as well. It's going to be a first down and yards after the catch. And, the pass wasn't on target, but it did look like Means let up a little bit. What else did you mention? Why Phil is supposedly good enough to be on the field? I don't know. We keep trying to figure out. We keep trying to figure that one out, Biz. I don't have an answer. Michael B says, did it seem to you that Pitt wasn't even coached tonight? And do they even practice during the week? Crazy amount of false starts, delay of games. Shaking my head. Yeah, I think they ended up with 3 delay of games. One of them was intentional. They almost had a 4th. Which, the intentional delay of game, man, just go for it. Don't try and get them to jump off sides. Do a hard count and then run a play. Do the hard count thing a bunch of times so they start to relax and they're like, oh, Pitt, they're not going to run a play here. And then once they relax, boom, then snap the ball and run it. You needed 2 yards. How many times are you going to be that close? How many times are you going to have that opportunity to score? Where were they at that point? They took the delay of game so they could punt, right? That was early in the game. Yeah, 4th and 2 from the 49. From your own 49. So you're pretty much at midfield. Do the hard count. Get them to relax. And then snap the ball and go. Instead, they take the delay of game. So they took 3. One of them was intentional, but they could have had another one that they called timeout just before it happened. Ryan Baer obviously had a tough time on that last drive. He was frustrated. I don't know if there was something unique with the cadence. To some extent, and then the center had one. Terrence Moore had a false start, but Virginia Tech's center had a false start as well. So I think those were the 3 on Pitt. Terrence Moore had 1, and then Ryan Baer had the 2 on the final drive. Yeah, I mean it's careless stuff. It's what's the word I'm looking for? I mean, they're just not paying attention. It's a lack of focus, which has been a problem in the past for this team. Some lack of focus issues, things like those unforced penalties, false starts, procedure things. You do have a redshirt freshman playing in a crazy loud environment. He gets a little jumpy. Virginia Tech twitches. He jumps. I mean, I'm not excusing it. It was all a mess. I think is what it comes down to. It was all a mess. Let's see here. Jack says, Peak, I love you. Sorry to do this to you, but give a full dissertation from Narduzzi's perspective as to why Phil will start next week. It's interesting, Jack. I feel like I should do another shot before I do that. a full dissertation on Pat Narduzzi's rationale on why Phil Dracovic will start next week. He didn't turn the ball over, but he did turn the ball over. He did turn the ball over. He fumbled. He didn't throw any interceptions. He almost threw two that were in the defender's hands. And he had a Hail Mary that, probably could have been picked off. He had that deep pass to Jake McConaughey that could have been picked off. But I guess they didn't get picked off, so it doesn't count. But that would be the rationale. That he hasn't really turned the ball over that much other than, his 3 interception game. He hasn't turned the ball over that much, and maybe Christian Vera turns it over more in practice. That's the extent of the rationale. And I can't, we are at the point now, and we didn't just arrive at this point tonight. We've been at this point for the last week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, where all they're really asking of the quarterback is don't screw up. Can you just please not screw up? Can you just make simple passes, easy passes? If you have a receiver who's open 5 yards from you, can you just throw it in somewhere where it's going to get to his hands before it hits the ground? They basically have been saying, we don't need you to throw 75 yards above means, or, and then they tried that a couple times. We don't need you to do that. Just take some easy stuff, man. You got this really good tight end. You got this, number 86. You got this really good wide receiver, number 9. You got these backs who can catch passes. Just kind of dump it off to those guys. Pick up some yards, loosen up the defense so we can run the ball. That's all they're asking him to do. And he completes 11 passes. 3 out of 3 games, 4 games, whatever it is. He's completed less than 5 passes in the first half. Can't even do the most basic, simple things. And I think it's issues with Dracovic. I think it's issues with this offense. I think it's issues with the way it's designed and the way it's called. I think it's issues with the offensive line. I mean, this offense is broken front to back. And I don't know how you fix it. Because whatever little glimmer of hope there was from the way Phil Dracovic played in the first half against North Carolina, whatever slight little, he wasn't so bad. He went 11 of 15. He had 109 yards, and 80 of those were on 3 plays. So his other 8 completions gained 29 yards. But it's okay. He was taking what was there. That's good. Whatever was there, that's gone, because he didn't do those things tonight. He connected on 1 big pass. He had Sebo Flemister make a good play with some broken tackles on another pass. And he had a couple okay passes. And he finished with 11 completions. I don't know what's it going to take to make a change, and what's the rationalization for starting him again? I don't know. And Pat Narduzzi doesn't have a Monday press conference this coming week because they're off next weekend. So maybe he thinks we'll just forget about it by the time we get to next Monday, the next Monday, not this Monday, which would be October 2nd. By the time we get to October 9th, maybe he thinks we'll just forget about it. I don't know. But I love you too. Thanks, Jack. I appreciate it. Dan Green, I see you as a super chat. I don't know what there's a comment from you, Dan. I'll read it. I don't think anything can be properly evaluated when you have a quarterback in there who cannot complete basic wide open passes at more than a 25% clip. Yeah, that's a big problem. Oh, man. I'm just seeing the video right now of Riley Leonard, the Duke quarterback, walking off the field on crutches. Feel bad for him. That's my dog making that sound. I apologize if you hear it. It's not a pleasant sound. He's coughing over there. But yeah, seeing Riley Leonard walk off the field on crutches is a bummer for Duke. But I don't think we're feeling bad for any other teams right now. Let's see here. Scrolling through, do we have any other super chatters in here? Here's one. Biz says it's time to build a future rather than worry about the transfer portal. Well, that's the thing, though, Biz. The transfer portal is the future. I mean, like, you certainly, if you're a program like Pitt, you have to recruit, you have to keep recruiting, you have to recruit well. But you also need the transfer portal. And, like, going into next year, they need the transfer portal. And they're going to need to be aggressive in the transfer portal. And whatever efforts are made on Pitt's behalf in acquiring players from the transfer portal need to be aggressive, and they need to be done well. Because if you're not convinced about Christian Veillere and Nate Yarnell right now, you need to be looking for a quarterback in the transfer portal. You need to be looking for probably a wide receiver in the transfer portal. Although they brought in some of those young guys, they look good, but I mean, you probably need one. Probably need like a defensive end from the transfer portal. Might need a cornerback from the transfer portal. Might need an offensive lineman from the transfer portal. You need to go find those things because you need the guys who can come in and win right now. And you need to be able to develop your homegrown talent. You're only going to be able to get 3 or 4 of those impact transfers every year if you're Pitt. I think probably your cap on like starter caliber transfers is probably like 6 or less. Is what I would say that you're really realistically going to get on an annual basis. So you still need to be able to develop for the other, 16 starting spots or 18 starting spots or whatever it is on offense and defense. You're still going to need to be able to recruit and develop and all that. But you also have to be able to plug the holes. You have to be able to get the impact transfers who come in and play for you and play well. Not what Phil Dracovic has done. And I would say not what Keaton Slovis has done, but his play at BYU, which has not been as good as some of the stats would indicate. I think he's been just okay out there. But his just okay out there is a whole hell of a lot better than how bad he was here, which makes you wonder, why was he so bad here and why has he been okay out there? You have to be able to plug the holes, though. The transfer portal is a big part of it. It's going to continue being a big part of it. And if you don't use it to its fullest potential and capacity, then you are going to fall even further behind. The transfer portal is, quite frankly, it's what's going to give a team like Pitt a chance to stay competitive. It really is, because you're going to be able to go out. If you can go out, if you can be aggressive, if you can target and land the right guys, then you're going to be able to, then you can be successful pretty much year in, year out. And it's probably going to give you a better chance at having consistent, sustained success. Now, again, a program like Pitt's going to have to recruit well and develop well and evaluate well. They're going to have to keep doing what they've been doing on defense. And I'll sidetrack just for a moment about the defense. All right. Yeah, that was bad tonight. That was bad. They got run on like crazy, particularly in the perimeter runs. Kyron Jones did just about everything he wanted against Pitt. I still think there are talented players on this defense, but they replaced a lot of guys this offseason. You look at the guys they lost, particularly right up the middle. You look at losing Kalijah Cansey. You look at losing Servassier Dennis. You look at losing Brandon Hill and Eric Hallett. And the reality is that all those guys, particularly Dennis, Hill, and Hallett, were much better by the time they left than they were when they first became regular contributors and regular starters. It took time for those guys to grow into those roles, just like it's taking time and will take time for Javon McIntyre and P.J. O'Brien and Donovan McMillan and, Solomon DeShields and Kyle Lewis. It'll take time, and it is taking time. And there are little steps forward and there are little steps backward. But we talked about this all in the offseason. We talked about this all in the summer. We talked about it in the spring, about how there was going to be a rough road for this group. And I've said this a bunch of times. It's one thing to talk about it in May and June. It's going to be rough for a little bit. And then actually to watch it and experience it where they give up. What did they end up giving up in this game? Final stats, they gave up 228. No, they gave up 199 rushing yards. Sack adjusted, they gave up 213. Tootin rushed for 109 yards on 24 carries. Drones rushed for 2 touchdowns. It just felt like, it was kind of like the Cincinnati game. And West Virginia game. Actually, West Virginia game is a great example. They got a lot of their, they piled up the rushing yards that they had through, volume, through running the ball 51 times. But it just felt like when they needed to get a stop, they just couldn't. And that was the case, I thought, again, tonight. And I thought, Virginia Tech ran the ball better than West Virginia or Cincinnati against Pitt. But they were able to just keep getting gains whenever they needed them. Pitt's defense couldn't get a stop when it needed it. Well, this is what it looks like when you're breaking in a lot of new players, when you have the kind of turnover that they've had on defense. And I don't think it's as much of a talent issue as it is an experience issue. Some of the guys, it's a talent issue. But I think Solomon DeShields is really good, and I think he played pretty well tonight. I think Shane Simon made play. Bleh. Must be after midnight. I'm starting to lose my words. Shane Simon made plays tonight. Braylon Lovelace obviously showed the potential that he's got, and he had his weak spots. I think Kyle Lewis looks like he can be pretty good. There's potential in these guys. I think McIntyre's going to be good. I think McMillan is going to be good. I think P.J. O'Brien's going to be good. But they're sort of figuring it out on the job right now. And in this defense, that can be, and in most defenses, that can be an unforgiving spot to be in. Because as you're figuring it out on the job, you're giving up yards, and you're giving up plays, and you're giving up points. And that's been the case for this defense so far. I still think they'll be better defensively by the end of October than they are right now, and certainly by the end of November. But in the meantime, they're giving up quite a bit. Let's see. I think there was another super chat that came in here. And we appreciate everybody who's joining on the super chat. Bill Florigen says, we have a lot of issues, but Cignetti needs fired now. Besides Wofford, has the D ever played with a lead? Playing Phil is an exercise in futility now. No, I don't think they've had a lead. Well, no, they had a lead against North Carolina. They were up 7-0 and 14-7. So they have had a lead. They have led in games since Wofford, but not much. And that was pretty much it. North Carolina. And the defense couldn't hold in that situation because that was a really tough offense to play against. I mean, Pitt's offense, it's broken. This is 5 games now. Do you realize that? We're almost halfway through the season. It's 5 games. And this offense has not been good at all. Its best points, when it's been at its best, is still not very good. They scored... trying to do some math real quick. They scored 2 offensive touchdowns against North Carolina. 2 offensive touchdowns tonight. They got 3 offensive touchdowns against Cincinnati. So against FBS competition, they have not scored more than 3 offensive touchdowns, and they've only scored more than 2 offensive touchdowns once. FBS competition, they played Cincinnati. They scored 3 offensive touchdowns. West Virginia, they didn't score a single offensive touchdown. And the last 2 games, they've scored 2 offensive touchdowns each. You can't win like that. You can't win like that. And no matter how you want to parse it, no matter how you want to break it down, you talk about the pass concepts and the route trees and the complexity and this and that. We can talk about how this offense just moves. Everything moves slowly. Nothing happens fast. A great example was there was a slant pattern to Dejon Reynolds on the final drive, 1st and 10. It was a slant, and the pass got broken up because it took so freaking long to develop. It was like the opposite of a quick hitter. It was like a slow toucher or something. Nothing happens fast in these offenses, but I digress. My point is that we could talk about all of these little issues, this thing and that thing. Well, they don't do this very well. They don't do that very well. And this is a problem and that's a problem. We could talk about all of that. But it boils down to, are you scoring points? Are you putting points on the board? And they're not. They've scored, I just counted it off. Against FBS competition, they've scored 7 offensive touchdowns in 4 games. You can't win like that. You can't win like that. No matter how good your defense is, in college football, you cannot win averaging less than 2 touchdowns per game. You can't. Right? 7 in 4 games. Am I adding that up wrong? 3 against Cincinnati, none against West Virginia, 2 in each of the last 2 games. Let me check the chat. Somebody will tell me if I'm wrong about this. Am I adding this up wrong, anybody? I don't see anybody saying that I'm adding it up. If you only can get 7 offensive touchdowns in 4 games, you're not doing well enough. And I bet if we went back and looked through last year, that's about where they were. 2 or 3 offensive touchdowns per game. You can't win like that. You can't play like that in college football. And I know people say, well, that's what Narduzzi wants. He wants this kind of... No. He knows he needs to score points. And he has to know. He has to know. 2 offensive touchdowns per game. Less than 2 offensive touchdowns per game. It's not cutting it. It's not good enough. If you score less than 2 offensive touchdowns per game, you know what your record is after 5 games? 1-4. You know how many games you lose in a row? 4. You know what your record is against FBS competition? 0-4. You know what your record is against ACC teams? 0-2. Because you can't score. And that's on the quarterback. That's on the offensive line. That's on the wide receivers. Not really the tight ends, because Gavin Bartholomew caught a handful of passes tonight. Malcolm Epps had one thrown in the dirt. Carter Johnson got overthrown on one, so I can't really say the tight ends. But it's on the quarterback. It's on the O-line. And it's on the coordinator. 18 games. 18 games last year and this year. And this is where they're at. What's the record over 18 games? 10-8? 10-8. Having lost their last 4. It's a tough spot to be in. But that's where they're at. And they have 2 weeks to try and figure something out. But unless what you figure out is, how well, what kind of game plan can be developed for Nate Yarnell, I'm not really sure what you're going to figure out over the next 2 weeks. If you keep trying to do the same things, you're probably going to get the same results. I think the defense can get better. I think the defense will get better. This offense might have a ceiling. Very well may be at that ceiling. And I'm not really sure what solutions present themselves to help you between now and the end of November. There are solutions after the season, but I don't know what solutions really exist for this offense between now and the end of December. You can't hang your hat on 75-yard touchdown passes, the Bub means, and completing 6 passes on the final drive of a game when you're just trying to manage some respectability, which you failed at doing because you threw check down passes on 3rd and 31 and 4th and 20. So I don't really, you can't hang your hat on that. You can't say, look how close we are. We hit that 75-yard touchdown pass. We got the 61-yard screen. We completed 6 passes on 1 drive at the end of the game. No, you can't. You can't hang your hat on that. That doesn't mean that you're close to figuring it out. It doesn't mean that it's close to clicking. You had 72 rushing yards or whatever it was, not counting sacks. If you count in the sacks, you had 38 rushing yards. Nothing close to clicking about that. All right, let's see if there's any more super chatters before we hang up the phone here. No, you guys got a lot of comments and questions there. I apologize to anybody apologize to everybody we didn't get to. Wait, somebody said don't forget my super chat. Let me see if there's one that I didn't read. Biz, I read yours. Michael B, I missed your second super chat. Oh, Chris, sorry about that, Chris. Chris says Chris, as mad as I am at Phil Dracovic, I have to say that the offensive line did him no favors, can't run, can't pass, and the line and the coaches have to do better. The offensive line will be one that I think will be interesting to watch because they'll there's a bunch in here that I missed. We're going to be on for a little bit here, guys. Don't go anywhere. The offensive line will be interesting to watch because I think there's some talented players on that group. I think Ryan Baer is going to be really good. I really do. I know it was rough for him tonight, and it's been rough for him last week. But you know what? If you want to write off Ryan Baer right off the bat, go back and watch some of Dorian Johnson's games from when he first stepped in. His first start was against Georgia Tech down there in 2013. I think it was Jeremiah Atauchu was the defensive end. I think he had 6 sacks in the game. Tom Savage got sacked 6 or 7 times, and most of them came from Dorian Johnson's side. So it can be rough in your first go as a starting offensive lineman, particularly a tackle. I still think Ryan Baer is super talented. He's physically gifted. I think he's going to be really good. He just, it's going to take some time. I could see the offensive line, like the defense, improving a decent amount by the end of November. I think those guys can be pretty good. It's just going to take time, like with the defense. And it's not easy to stomach that when you're watching games like tonight. Eric Bruno says, until Pat hires an offensive coordinator that can develop a quarterback, recruit well, and call an updated offensive game plan, things will never change. Look, I mean, we go back and forth a lot about what kind of offensive coordinator they need. They need somebody who can score points. And I think there's a lot of different ways to do that. I think there are ways that Narduzzi wants to do it and ways he doesn't. And he's going to have to decide what kind of... He's going to have to decide how he wants to score points. I guess the first decision is he has to decide if the current amount of points they're scoring is enough. And then if he decides that it's not, then he has to decide how they want to score points and find an offensive coordinator that can score points the way he wants to score them. I don't think that way looks like Mark Whipple, but I don't think it looks like what they're doing now, which is averaging less than 2 offensive touchdowns per game. Biz says Alliance 412 needs to pressure Narduzzi to replace Frank Signetti. Let's go Nate Yarnell. Well, I don't think Alliance 412 is going to pressure him to change any coaches. That's not really what they're there to do. Let's see. Is there any other super chats? Did I miss any of you guys? Anybody have any other comments or questions? Michael B. Got another one in there. Chris, Narduzzi said, I still feel that he's the guy back there making the play about Dracovic. Not good news, Chris. Phil is going to start next game. Well, I would say this. I don't know if he's going to change his mind. I don't know if he's going to change quarterbacks. I don't know if he's going to start Baer or Yarnell in that next game. I don't know if he's going to stick with Dracovic. I don't know what he's going to do. Don't take his post-game comments too literally. You know what I mean? Don't take them as complete gospel. Right after the game, Narduzzi, I mean, we all make fun of him for saying, I'm going to go watch the tape and all that kind of thing. But I think he really does need to sort of consider things, when cooler heads are prevailing. When he can sit down and actually rewatch the game and kind of see what was happening and why it happened and what was happening and all this different stuff. As opposed to right in the heat of the moment after the game. I think he probably knows that it's better to withhold judgment until you can review what happened, rather than spouting off and saying something really negative about your guy that could potentially hurt his confidence or something like that. I think he's erring on the side of caution in the postgame and not really, trying to throw anybody too far under the bus after a game. And I think that's admirable. I think he goes back and watches it and gets the full story on whether guys were playing well or not playing well or who needs to be better and this kind of thing. So I kind of see why he does that, and I think that makes sense. I wouldn't expect him to come out in the post game after tonight's game and say, "Yeah, we're benching Dracovic. We're not. I can't do this anymore. I can't do this, 5 completions crap anymore." I would not expect him to say that. I would expect them to come out and say, we still believe in Phil, and then go back and watch a tape and find out if they actually do still believe in Phil. So I'm not going to put too much stock in the post-game comments there, Michael B. We might finally be all through the let's see. I think that's about all the super chats. Anybody else wants to get in, go for it. Final thoughts from this one. I wrote a lot in the 3-2-1 column yesterday. I wrote about this game. I wrote about the remaining 8 games, counting this one. It's now down to 7, but I wrote about the state of the team, state of the program, where they are going forward, and what can be done and what can be accomplished this year. And I looked ahead at the schedule, and Virginia Tech, Boston College, and to some extent Wake Forest. I looked at and said, those are games Pitt should win. They should. And you get those 3, and then you look ahead to, that will get you to 4 wins, and then you look ahead to like the undefeated teams, the teams that entered this weekend undefeated: Louisville, Syracuse, and Duke. Now, at this point, only one of those 3 is still undefeated. It's Louisville, and they didn't look all that great against NC State anyway. But I said you look at those 3 teams, and I said you only have to take 2 out of 3 against those guys, and then you're at 6 wins. You don't need to beat Notre Dame. You don't need to beat Florida State. You don't need to sweep all 3 of those teams that were undefeated entering the weekend. You just take care of business against, if you win 2 out of 3 and you take care of business against, if you win 2 out of 3 against Louisville, Duke, and Syracuse, and you take care of business against the bottom of the ACC, you're bowl eligible. And that's lowering the bar considerably on what the goals were for this season, but you're bowl eligible, so it's a good place to be. I don't want to say I didn't consider the possibility that they would blow games against the bottom of the ACC, but here they are. And like I said at the start, there were 2 games in the conference today that really were separation games. Games that were going to decide who was at the bottom of the conference. And it was Boston College against Virginia, and it was Pitt against Virginia Tech. And you weren't going to play yourself into the top of the league by winning one of those games, but you could at least separate yourself from the bottom. If you weren't going to move yourself up into the top 4, but you could at least be 11 or 12 instead of 13 or 14. Well, right now, Pitt's 13 or 14. That's where they are. That's the reality of the situation. They are one of the 2 worst teams in the conference right now, by just about every metric. And they might be 13 because Virginia's 0-5, but Virginia will play William and Mary next week, so they'll get their first win against an FCS team, just like Pitt has 1 win, and it's against an FCS team. It's tough. It's tough to go from the very top of the ACC all the way down to the very bottom in the span of like 2 years. It's tough. But we're seeing it. All right, let's check here one last time. EV says, if you had to guess right now who starts in 2 weeks, at quarterback, I would guess that it will be Phil Dracovic. Nothing I can say about that. It's just how it goes. All right. We'll wrap it up on that note. Pitt loses 38-21. They're 1-4. They've lost 4 games in a row. They've never lost 4 games in a row under Narduzzi, right? I think the worst they had was a 3-game losing streak in 2018 or 2017 maybe. Who cares? Thanks for tuning in, though. No matter what you think of the game, no matter how it goes, no matter what what your take was, no matter how disappointed you were, I'm glad that we could all get together here and hang out for an hour, or 75 minutes, whatever we ended up doing here tonight. and talk about it for a little bit. I'm going to go write some stuff for Panther-Lair.com. You keep drowning your sorrows. I'll, get some of the inspiration going here. And, we'll regroup and get back at it over the weekend. Jim's got a lot of coverage coming to you from Blacksburg there on Panther-Lair.com. Make sure you check out the website, Panther-Lair.com. Listen, before you leave, you might not like what happened tonight, but you can still like the video, right? Like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. You don't want to miss these live shows, right? That's always the fun thing to do, even after a loss. But, appreciate everybody who tuned in. Appreciate everybody who came, hung out for some time tonight, all the comments and questions, all the super chatters. Appreciate you guys for sure. So thanks again for tuning in. Try and enjoy your Sunday. Have a good Sunday, and we will get back to you on Monday morning on the Morning Pit right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.